All right, we are now live. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Ismail, for joining us here. Really excited for this one. We've done this once or twice in the past, where we basically just go super deep on a particular application or tool or platform, and I always think those are the most fun because sometimes we have like five people on and everyone talks for 10 minutes, but there's so much to talk about in this space and so many kind of like intricacies and nuances to dive into. So this is going to be a really fun one. And this also means we'll have a lot of time for questions from everyone in the audience. So please start dropping
Amazing.
questions on ideally in the Q&A box. So if you look, there's a chat box. That's where you're in by default. If you look underneath there, there's a little question mark. Drop your questions in there. Upvote the ones you want to hear answered. I'll be going through those throughout this and taking the kind of like the most popular ones and the most relevant ones. LangChain covers a lot of topics. We're going to keep it focused on agents and Superagent in particular. Other minor logistical thing, like, this is being recorded. It will be available at the link after the fact, and we'll upload it on YouTube within a day or two. With that being said, Ismail, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Superagent and then maybe jump into a quick demo and start walking us through?
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you for having me on. I am, I've been following LangChain for ever since you guys started.
From the
And
beginning, I remember, yeah, we interacted on Twitter a bunch. You made a bunch of PRs. Like, I remember that
yeah,
well.
yeah, document loaders. That was the thing back then, right?
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to bring in some. I actually built the Figma loader because I was doing like a marketing co-pilot assistant type of thing. And so I needed that, and that was my first real contribution to LangChain, which is an amazing framework. So my background is basically I'm raised in Sweden. I live in Sweden, thus the dark and cold weather that you don't see, but it is dark and cold outside. And my background is I'm a chemist originally, actually. And the weird thing is that I've never worked as a chemist. I've always been, playing around with my computer, my Amiga, since I was a kid, and never really thought of myself as a scientist, really. But the weird thing with chemistry and programming is that it's quite similar. It's both like, theoretical, but also very practical at the same time, which is pretty amazing. And so my background is I'm an entrepreneur. I've built companies for the past 10 years. I built my first company, which was an ad tech company 10 years ago. And we did basically, something that we called smart ads, this was before LLMs was, even on the agenda. And what we did was that we basically, took large e-commerce companies' product inventory and automatically created ads through some algorithms that I had written, and then published them to the different marketplaces. And that became a success, and I've been, building companies and products ever since, basically. And so the background of Superagent is that, I was building a co-pilot for marketing people about 1.5 years ago. And my dream was, this was pre-ChatGPT, but I had the idea that I wanted the marketing people to be able to generate social media ads through Stable Diffusion at GPT-3 at that time, I think. And so I tried to build something really similar to ChatGPT, but more focused on the marketing use case in itself. And it was a mess. It was so hard. And the technical challenge was, huge. I had to fine-tune models. I had to run a bunch of scripts. I had to write a bunch of code. I did 4 iterations, and at the same time, I think we had first 2 weeks we had 20,000 signups, and then we had after a month, we had 100,000 signups, and I was super stressed. And so what ended up happening was that I stumbled upon LangChain just out of, I don't know how I did. I think I just saw it somewhere, and I was like, yeah.
Probably Twitter. You know, all we do is tweet, so probably Twitter.
Yeah, probably. And I'm not that active on Twitter, but I saw it there and tried it out, and I was like, damn, this means that I can like throw away all of the code I've written, basically. So I implemented that, and it was great. I mean, I was blown away, and that was the beginning of, you know, Superagent in itself, because I built a framework that one could use to basically create any type of co-pilot or AI assistant, leveraging LangChain and a bunch of different other frameworks and models in order to achieve that. And decided, I think it was around 4 months ago, to open source the whole framework, because my thinking was like, if you can make ads out of it, you could basically do anything. So why keep it, you know, for myself? So I just open sourced it, and that's where like the story begins for me. And just to give some context before I give you guys a quick demo of how Superagent works and what we're trying to achieve, I believe that in a foreseeable future, we will have agents running at basically any enterprise or any business. And I see that future being sooner than later. I believe that in a year or two, we will have virtual employees all over the place. And I myself have a virtual employee. I have a code sniffer. I have a bunch of agents that I run that makes my work and my everyday work like 20 to 30% more productive. And that's with the current tool set that is available right now. So Superagent is basically a framework that allows
Superagent?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
So the first agent I built on top of Superagent was something I call the issue sniffer. So I basically deployed it to my GitHub, and it just went through all of the issues and just emailed me possible solutions to issues and bugs that were reported. And so that was the aha moment for me, that, oh, if I can do this, then this will probably be available in the near future everywhere. And so my vision is somewhere that is going to happen. Either that's going to happen or it's not going to happen, but I believe it will happen, basically. And in order for it to happen, the bottleneck right now is that there aren't enough people like you, me, and all of the other engineers that are working in this space. And particularly, those engineers are not working at the companies that, you know, the mainstream, you know, old school manufacturing, consultancy, law firms. All of the ML AI engineers are doing, you know, completely different things. Some of them are focusing on research. Some of them are focusing on other type of technology startups, but they're not present at these enterprises today. So I wanted to build a framework that enabled those developers that work at those enterprises to onboard themselves on AI applications, LLMs, and agents. That was my like primary goal. And in order to do that, my thesis was that, you know, what tools are they used to using? They're used to like implementing Stripe with a single line of code, right? They're used to implementing Segment or some other third-party service that they run in their application. It doesn't require them to understand anything about, you know, how that service is built. It doesn't require them to change their environment or stack or dependencies or anything like that. So I wanted to build something that was, you know, as easy as implementing as Stripe with one line of code, basically. implement the SDK, run it on your iOS device, in your web app, on your server, etc., etc. So that's like the premise of Superagent and what we are trying to achieve. We want to be a part of the transition from the way we work today and the way work will be done in the future, and the increase in human capacity and productivity. That's our goal. That's the vision, at least, that I have with Superagent in itself. So it's a vertical solution. You can build any type of assistant copilot on top of it. You can load your data sources. You can load access to APIs, third-party services, or proprietary services that you have in-house, and connect all of that in one single SDK, and then run it in your application, in whatever type of application you're planning on building. And most of people use it to build like copilots and AI assistants. That's like 90%.
Yeah. So I want to talk. So I have a lot of questions around like what are people building and what are some of the difficulties. But first, I think it would be really helpful to see an example of this in action and see concretely kind of like what that looks like, because that's a very ambitious and lofty vision, right? And so I think it would be helpful to ground it in what it is now.
So I'm going to share my screen. I hope you guys see it.
Yep.
And I can see it. So basically, this is like the Superagent UI. All of this is open source, so you can go to the repository and fork it and play around with it and run it. The documentation is so. We're working on it, but this is how the UI looks like. I just want to mention that people usually don't use the UI. They use the SDKs primarily for
everything, for like creating agents and using agents.
Yeah, exactly. They create and orchestrate and provision agents primarily through the SDK. And this UI is more like a prototyping thing that people use to build one agent and see how that works, and then replicate that in code through the SDKs. That's
why
do
you think that is? Why do you think, like, I can see why people would call it from SDKs. That makes sense. But like, why would they create it from an SDK as opposed to creating it from the UI?
Because most of the users we have, they have a pretty complex stack. I mean, they have different type of frameworks, different type of tools that they use in their frameworks in whatever app they're building. And from what I hear from our users, they rather do it through the SDK than through the UI. It's not scalable to do it through the UI either. Like, we have users building, chat bot assistants that their users are going to use. And so doing all of that through the UI is both tedious and not that scalable and controllable. It's not programmatic. So I think that's the main reason why people would use the SDK rather than the UI. But the UI basically looks like this, and it's you have your agents, you have your tools, you have your data sources, prompts, and then some API tokens that you can use in your SDK. Some tagging and logs as well. This is like the alpha version of Superagent, and we are releasing a newer version of this actually tomorrow. So you have to check that out as well. It has a completely like revamped UI, whole new infrastructure, and more scalable, more concurrent, and all of that stuff. It's been a real hassle getting all of this to work in production, actually. So I've learned a lot, and we've built something very stable that we can run with. So I'm just gonna create a simple agent. I'm just gonna do a simple like Q&A over your PDF kind of thing, just to show you how easy it is. So we have something called data sources. So I'll just go in here, and here you can upload structured data, like CSVs, but also unstructured data like PDFs and texts. And we rely heavily on the LangChain, like splitting, loading, and all of that stuff. I really love how you guys have so many different type of splitters, and in order to basically feed all of that data into the vector stores that we use in a good way. I specifically like the code splitters that you guys have, which is amazing.
I mean,
and that, yeah,
splitting is like such an underrated part of doing all this retrieval stuff. And I mean, everything related to pre-processing is like, it's so hard to get the right chunks and the right kind of like, you know, the right basically cleaned version of the text. So you know, glad to hear that you're finding some utility there.
Yeah, that's and what I've learned doing all of this, that yeah, it is hard, and you need to, like, it's a lot of trial and error to get it to work. And the thing is that our users, they don't know anything about that stuff. They don't. Yeah. They have never heard about splitting and vector stores and that kind of stuff.
And so do they even care? Like, do they even care, or do they?
They don't care. Yeah. They don't care. They don't care. They you know, if they build a Q&A bot over a PDF, the only thing they care about is that the questions their users ask get answered in the correct way. So it's all about performance, how fast it is, how many tokens it takes to get the answer, and if the answer is satisfactory to the person asking the question. That's the only thing they care about. Everything else is abstracted away from them, so they don't have to think about it. But basically what you can do is to you know, upload a file. Let's see if I can find some kind of PDF here that I have. Of course, I should have, you know, prepared this, but I didn't. So I have a PDF. I have a presentation that one of our contributors did for a Swift SDK that he released. So a community thing. It's this guy. Shout out to Simon. So I'll just use that. And now, yeah, now it's, you know, splitting, ingesting, and pushing it to the vector store. And when that's done, we can use it in our agent later on. So now we have a PDF here, and I have a bunch of other PDFs that we could use that are probably easier to understand, that I've worked with before. Again, you can use structured, unstructured. You can upload web pages, sitemaps. You can connect Superagent to your applications and stuff like that. This part has been one of the hardest parts to actually, you know, do, because most of these data sources, I don't think people really realize that almost all of the data here is structured. It's in JSON format. So processing that through a vector store could be, you know, insufficient in some senses, because it doesn't have the full context of, you know, all of the customers in your intercom, as an example. So we are gradually like rolling out these integrations in order to make sure that it works. First out was Airtable. It was the first structured data source, third-party data source that we integrated with, which works pretty well. And we use a REPL for that to analyze that, basically in Python. So we load all of the data into the REPL and then do analysis over that and have that hosted on a separate service so that it's not, you know, due to security reasons, basically.
Yeah, do you do that hosting yourself, or do you use like a third-party solution to like do that sandboxing, basically?
I've tried, but I found it pretty complex. So we have a specific setup, a sandbox that we built ourselves for this. If anybody knows a good like open source sandbox for running, you know, Python REPLs or pandas or whatever it might be, please shout out. I would definitely switch, because it is a headache to post that, and that's not our primary, like, the thing we want to focus on. So that would be nice if anyone in the audience would have. So basically, yeah, you can connect your stuff here, and you know, you go to agents, or if you want to add a tool, we can go through that as well. That's pretty simple as well. You can just add a tool and you can choose whatever tool it is you want. And we've added some tools to start with, and we're adding more tools as we go. The tool that's used the most is actually the API tool, which ingests a open API spec and runs that. And the power of this specific tool is that most APIs have open API specs, so you could connect your agent to any third-party API. Really, there are like repositories of thousands of open API specs that people have created themselves and host on GitHub. So you can pick any of those and run it into your in your agent. And you just you have to specify what the tool is going to be used for in order for the LLM to understand what it's supposed to do with it. And you can connect whatever you want here, basically. So agents is pretty simple as well. You just new agent, and today we have two types of agents. We have the OpenAI function calling agent that runs on your implementation of that, the LangChain implementation of the OpenAI functions agent. And then we have a React agent, which is more complex and more error prone. So you really need to understand how to prompt that and do that. And one example of a prompt is the one I posted on your hub, which is like a workflow prompt, basically.
I'm going to find that and post this in the chat now so everyone can see it. It's the #1 prompt on the prompt hub, and it's
that's sick. I didn't think that it would be that people would be interested in that, but that's sick that it's people are interested. I use it for the next version that we are running.
Okay.
So there is a paper called Plan and Solve Plus, which is something that I've read and tried to replicate. And the thing with that prompt is that it doesn't actually ingest the answers. It just looks at the input parameters and the types, and then the output parameters of each function. And then based on that, it creates a JSON workflow that you can run in an external toolkit. Like you can write a toolkit in TypeScript or Python or whatever you would want to, and run it. So it's not dependent on any LLM actually looking at the response of the APIs. So you just select whatever agent you want, and then you have all of your tools that you've configured. I have a bunch of them configured for myself.
How many tools do you give an agent?
As many as you want. But there is I've noticed that if you give it more than 10, it has a really hard time choosing. Especially if the descriptions are similar. So a thing that we are doing in a couple of weeks, and I know we've discussed this on Twitter as well, is that we are fine-tuning specific models on your agent. So as soon as you create an agent, you will have a model that is fine-tuned on your data sources, and you will have a model that's fine-tuned on your tool descriptions as well, so that it would better, be able to choose what type of tool to use when. And we had a Superagent community member write a tool description test case using LLM. So basically, we fed the LLM a bunch of tools, and we tried to run the agent. And depending on what type of tool the agent, uses, we collect that data, or he collects that data, and then tries to fine-tune the LLM to pick the right tool. So you can use the fine-tunings to do a bunch of optimizations on both RAG and tool selection. Hopefully there will be a model in the future that does this automatically, but there isn't one at the moment anyways. So let's say you want to pick a tool. You just pick the metaphor tool as an example, and then you go to next, and you have your data sources. You can pick whatever data source you want. Let's take the Amazon earnings as an example, and then you write a prompt like, you know.
And so what's being done with those data sources? Are those being converted to like retriever tools under the hood, basically?
Yeah.
Or?
So exactly. So I know that you guys have a bunch of chains for retrieval and stuff, but we just run everything as tools. We run everything as tools. So even the data sources are tools. So anything in Superagent can be a tool, even an agent.
What would like a data source is a tool. A tool takes an input and returns an output. Like, what is the input and the output to that data source tool?
So the data source tool, depending on what document. So for each document that you upload to your agent, or that you connect to your agent, will create a separate tool for that. And each document has its own tool description, basically. And so and each document has a typed input. So you have to specify, or we specify for you, rather. You don't have to specify anything. You only have to write the description, and we specify what inputs it has and what output it has, so that the agent can run it in a sane way, basically. So the agent knows what each tool has for input params and output params. So that's how we do it. So everything is a tool. One cool thing that we have is that you can actually create a tool of an agent, and that's something we call nested agents. So you can have one agent that has access to several other agents, depending on what you're trying to build. So you just input a prompt. You are an AI assistant and blah blah blah. You know this already. And then you go to next and you choose your model. So we support, like, since this is an OpenAI function calling model, we only support those function calling APIs. And I haven't added the 32K GPT-4 yet, but I'll do that as well. But if you would choose a React type of agent, you could choose whatever LLM that you want, either like OpenAI, Hugging Face LLMs, or Anthropic, Cohere, whatever it might be. And if you fork it, you can even run your local LLMs if you want to. So we have support for that on the fork version.
There's a question about this in the chat, actually. Mm-hmm. Which there's a few questions about this. But what, I guess, besides OpenAI, or even so there's GPT-4, there's GPT 3.5. Right. So I guess one question is, how is GPT 3.5 good enough for a lot of these agents? And then let's maybe answer that first, and then I got another question.
Yeah. So I would say GPT 3.5 is good for querying unstructured data. It works, and it's pretty fast compared to GPT-4. But if you're doing structured data, I don't. The performance is really bad because how that works is that basically the LLM tries to write a query, and if that query isn't right, it won't work. You won't get the answer that you need. So GPT-4 is much better at writing those queries than GPT 3.5 is today, at least. What you could do is that you could fine-tune a GPT 3.5 to be even better at that use case. And what we are looking to do in the future is that we want to bring in specific models that are much smaller than the GPT models, that are fine-tuned for one specific purpose. An example of that might be SQL queries. Mm-hmm. That's something that smaller models that are trained on only that are really good at, and they can do it quickly, and it's really performant, and it's accurate as well. So utilizing those models will be something that we will do more in the future. But that all depends on what type of agent and what type of use case you have. And the other problem with models is that people don't have access to all of the different versions. I've noticed that, since you have to input your API key here in a later step, if you don't have access to, I don't know, GPT-4 32K0613, well, then you can't use it here either. So that's also something. And I know like not a lot of people of our users have access to Claude because they're non-technical, most of them. I mean, they're technical, but they are not ML, developers.
Yeah.
So you choose your model. Let's do this one because we want to show how performant it is. And you just input your API key, and you can enable memory or disable it. The reason why we have like a option on this is because sometimes people run agents as a microservice, not as a chatbot. And sometimes they need to be able to return a response from an API without manipulating it. And they don't need any memory for that. It's just a proxy for querying an API through an agent, as an example. Use cases for that is when you do like scraping. We have a lot of people doing, data aggregation on URLs, and they just want it returned in a structured format. They don't want it returned as a conversational string. So that's why we have this toggle for memory. And then we have, cache if you want to cache your LLM calls, and that can be that's actually implemented by one of our core contributors, Simonas. Shout out. And what that does is that it basically saves. It uses a vector store to cache question answer pairs basically, and then it retrieves if it's enabled, and if it's not enabled, it doesn't retrieve it from there. But it's really fast and performant. Vector stores are really fast. So, and when you've done this, you press next, and you can name your agent, and you can give it an avatar, and you can write a description for it, and that's used later on. I'll show you how that's used right now. So I don't have my API key here, but I have a agent. So we can start with running like the Metaphor agent, which is Metaphor is a search engine for LLMs. So here is the actual prototyping UI that we have. So you input your query here. You can select tools or data sources here and write a prompt, and do a bunch of different things. And you can just write like, list Elon's latest tweets. And then it runs. It doesn't have streaming in this UI, but it has streaming if you share it. So you can share this view in a more like chat-like way. And so here is like Elon's latest tweets, I guess. And we have a stack trace here. This is just like, since this agent is run on LangChain, it's the LangChain implementation. This is like the intermediate steps of that's taken. And in the next version we are releasing tomorrow, we have deep integrated LangSmith into that, because that's just amazingly better.
Oh, we should have done this webinar. We should have done this webinar tomorrow then, so you could have shown off the new version.
Yeah, but it's all right. I mean, I have posted like a bunch of videos of it on Twitter, so you guys can check it out, and I'll post some more when we go live. I haven't written all of the documentation for the new version, so I'm a bit hesitant to release it until I have everything written down so people can migrate, because it has breaking changes. We have redone the whole infrastructure, and so that it runs concurrently, and it's much more performant than this version is, even though this is pretty fast, but the other one is like twice as fast basically. So this is how it works. You can let's say I want to share this. I can share it by just a public link, and or I can embed it. And this was like the use case we were talking about earlier, like how do I use it directly from the UI? Well, you can embed it on your web page if you want to. And the embedding is basically, you take this script, you put it on your HTML page or JavaScript, website, and you get a chat box that you can run if you want to. And we have some no-code users as well, and they use this a lot. to build like Q&A over their website or Q&A over some documentation or whatever it might be. So you can do both of that.
What's the breakdown of your users in terms of like low code, no code, or kind of like developers?
So the developer breakdown is, I mean, most of the developers using Superagent, let's say 80% of the developers. So if we first split off like no code versus code, so we have like 80% developers, let's say 20%, somewhere like in that range, no code developers. And they only use this UI. They don't use the SDKs and stuff like that. The developers use the SDK, and in that group, I mean, I would say 90% of the developers are, the mainstream, web developer or iOS developer, or people that are used to building user experiences more than AI applications, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then we have the 10% that are more technical. And usually what they do is that either they implement the SDK or they fork off and implement it more deeply into their stack. So they might have, I've seen examples, we had a meetup 2 weeks ago, and I saw some examples of people doing really, really like amazing stuff. Like we have a user that's a broadband provider in the UK, and they have integrated Superagent into their stack for, building co-pilots internally. So they have loaded all of their documentation into that. So employees can, like, if they want to know how some API at some broadband thing works, they can just, search through that co-pilot and they'll get all of their answers. So we have those use cases as well. And I really like those use cases. I mean, I'm a technical guy myself. I love those use cases. And I'm always like blown away when people use it in that way. Because, it's just sick that people use it that way. I don't know how to explain it. It's just, blows my mind sometimes what people build with Superagent and other tools. But one common thing that I've seen is that, there are many like vertical agents that people build, like agents that are specifically doing one type of thing, and there are many of them, and Superagent is more of like a horizontal layer, so you can actually plug in agents like Multion as an example, which is an agent that I love. Like it's amazing. So you can plug that into Superagent, similar to how you can plug it into LangChain. And run that, or you can like fork and then integrate the both more deeply if you want to, if you don't want to run it through APIs or over the network. So this is basically how Superagent works. I can just give you like a sneak peek of the new version if you want to.
Yeah, let's see that. And then I've got a bunch of questions that I'd be curious to ask.
Sure.
Chat as well, but would love to see a sneak peek.
Yeah. So this is the new version. It's a bit more clean. I love UI, so this is easier, a cleaner way of doing it. So, but the same premise. We've redone the whole infra behind the scenes, but we also redone how you connect like your LLMs. So we'll start offering a bunch of different ways to configure like Hugging Face, replicate, local LLMs and all of that stuff inside of the UI as well. Because previously, I don't know if you noticed, but you had to like enter your API key every time you create an agent. Now we hold that for you, so you configure your LLM once, and then you can run it many times on many agents, basically. But the same premise with data sources as well and APIs. So you can create an API very similar to what we had in the previous one. And as you see here, you can actually create an API for an existing Superagent as well, and use that as a tool. And you can create your data sources, and one big thing that we did here is that, you know, loading local files doesn't work that well when you're running the SDK, because you need to
I
have.
don't also the screen that I see is a bit frozen on the previous one. I don't know if you're sharing something else or not. I hear some clicking, so I was assuming you were sharing something, but I'm still seeing the Super metaphor demo thing.
Oh, sorry. Let me just re-share my screen. Sorry. You guys missed the whole thing. Here we go. Now you got it. Sorry. So what I was saying was like the LLMs, it's more like configurable now. So we'll be adding a bunch of different LLMs here.
Nice.
Again, like Hugging Face, Replicate, all of those. The APIs, basically the same as before. You just, you know, add the details of your API and you know, configure it, you create it, and you can run it in your agent. And one big thing that we did with data sources is that we actually, you know, what I was saying was that when you run Superagent through the SDK, it's really tedious to use local files all of the time. You don't really have, you know, you have to have that on your server in order to be able to process it. So what we did is that we enable people to send in URLs to their APIs or to their data sources, and we host them for you. So you don't have to, like, you know, upload it to Amazon S3 or something and then paste in the URL. So we do all of that for you through the SDK, which is like a, you know, quality of life feature for the SDK. And then we have in the UI, you can, we have integrated a service called API Deck. I don't know if you've heard of them, but it's basically an OAuth layer that you can use. So you can authenticate into a bunch of different applications, and then you can use the data in those applications like Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, Box, and all of the different CRMs and, you know, help desk software and stuff like that. So how that works is that you basically just click this button and it will load a UI for you, and you can start, you know, choosing whatever documents you have on your Google Drive. You can like connect other services and stuff like that. So that's a big improvement that we have. One other thing that we are releasing is like workflows. So if you want a more controlled way of running multiple agents sequentially, passing inputs and outputs to them, similar to the prompt on the LangSmith hub, but more controlled. This is something that we have built in the SDK, but we haven't built the UI for it because I'm a bit, you know, allergic to these workflow UIs that are everywhere. I can't use them. I don't know how to use them. So I'm trying to figure out how to build a good UI for it. But you can run it in your SDK. Basically, how this works is that you connect agents together in a sequential like step, and you can run them sequentially, basically. Like you guys have a sequential chain as well. I know. So similar to that.
This is something that we've been thinking a bunch about recently as well, because I think there are definitely cases where you want like more control over the exact ordering of inputs and outputs. And so I think, really excited to see that. That's a great addition.
And then the agents themselves is like, you know, very similar to the previous view. It's a bit cleaner. You can like choose your models here. You can select tools, data sources, and this is the LangSmith integration that we did. So we have all your runs here on this specific agent. We basically couple them together with the data we get from LangSmith, and we have like, you know, out of the box you get like token usage and all of that stuff that people want, and the, you know, the question, the answer, and so you have all of that here, which is nice. And you can also, you know, download it, or not download it, but you can call it through the SDK if you want to manipulate it later on. One thing that I've wanted to do with our LangSmith account is to run an agent on it, just to understand what type of questions people are asking their co-pilots, assistants, and what type of answers they get. And if you couple that with the fine-tuning, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down thing, you could get a bunch of info on what works, what doesn't work, and stuff like that. So basically, this is like how that works. Otherwise, it's the same. You can share your stuff and build an embeddable agent, and you can query it and stuff like that. So you can do the same thing. Hopefully this works now. List Elon's latest tweets, and so it runs that, and hopefully runs that. Yeah, so it's much faster than the previous one, and this one streams in the UI as well, which is a better use case than not streaming. I think nice. It's a better UI at least. So this is the new version, but the main thing here is that we are introducing fine-tuning for your agent, both for the data sources and the tools, and then completely new infrastructure for running the agents concurrently in the cloud. So one thing I can mention before questions is that a difference between us and other frameworks is that we are hosted in a way, and we have a database layer on top of your agents, which is unique as well. So you can you have a state for each agent, which is really powerful when you're building out applications. So and that's pretty tough to build and maintain. So that's something we're really proud of having as well.
Yeah, so one of my questions was going to be like, how would you compare this to like AutoGPT? And
yeah,
there's probably other agent frameworks as well, and so maybe some of them are more relevant, but AutoGPT is like the one that jumps to mind, right? And so like, what are the main differences there?
So AutoGPT, I have to be frank, I haven't tried all of the agents out there, but I've tried Baby AGI, and I've tried AutoGPT through the UI they had a UI implementation of it, and for me that's more of the difference is that those are vertical agents. They have one agent loop that they are running, so they run a specific loop that does specific things, and it can do a bunch of things, but it's a specific way of doing things still. So in our case, we don't want to, we're agnostic to what type of loop or what type of, vertical agent you want to run. We want to support AutoGPTs, Baby AGIs. We believe they all fit into Superagent if people want to use them or users want to use them. So one example is like, there's this project called, I think it's called GPT Researcher or something like that, which is also like a specific like type of agent, and I know that people really love that, and some of the forkers have built tools for that specifically for Superagent, so you can run that in the cloud. So I see them more as users, more than competitors or stuff like that. But I'm really blown away by what they've done. So.
Okay, so then the next question that I have is like, what are the main use cases that you see people using this for? And maybe related to that, actually, let's start with that, and then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, so main use cases is co-pilots, AI assistants. Example, like we have a law firm building a co-pilot in-house, which is supposed to replace some of the work the paralegals do. We have a startup that sells an app to basketball coaches, where the basketball coaches, track all of the metrics they have when playing games, who scored goals, what play did they run, and they feed all of that into the app and then do Q&A on that structured data. We have that kind of use case. We have a lot of internal knowledge bases that are built on top of Superagent. And what we don't have, I mean, I've seen it all. We even have VCs using it, which is pretty strange. But what we don't have, and what I'm hoping that we can bring in, is action-based agents. So agents that do more than just retrieval, because for me APIs it's still retrieval, it's just structured retrieval through the network. But
Yeah.
actually doing agent actions is something that I'm looking forward to implementing.
Super interesting. And then this is maybe even not super agent specific, but like what types of use cases are good use cases for agents? Because there's a lot of talk about how agents like aren't reliable and they might not do it. But so what are cases where there are good use cases and what are some maybe bad use cases for agents?
I believe in general that agents today need to be small in order to work. So they need to be very specific. I see it like an ant colony. Every ant has a specific task. There are many, but together they're really strong. And I see agents the same way. And so the use cases I see where agents are really powerful is when you use it in a very like controlled way. Small agents that do one or two specific tasks have access to one or two tools or data sources, and then you can chain those together to make them really powerful. When people try to do a lot of things in one agent, it tends to not be as predictable. I mean, it's in the nature of the LLM, but it tends to be more wild. It tends to be not as performant. It tends to be not what you're looking for in the end.
Makes sense. Going through some questions rapid fire that popped up. Have you documented somewhere how you built the code/issue tool with Superagent?
It's actually a repository I can share. It's called Issue Sniffer, and I'll share it with you guys. And while we talk, I'll try to find it.
Awesome.
It's on my repository somewhere. Yeah,
and cool.
Actually, we have a Discord bot as well built on Superagent, which is called Superbot. So it has access to, similar to your Mendable thing, but for Discord.
Awesome. Yeah. There's two questions about different LLMs, but I think we already touched on that. Is there a way to store and sort the answer from the agent as a result of your work, like you would do when you file a presentation or a document, or is that on the roadmap somewhere?
Store and sort there's no way of doing that. So all agent runs are stored in our databases, so you can query the runs, but there's no like structured way of querying them. I mean, you have to query them by ID. So you have to keep a state of that agent and the runs. So you can get all of the runs, and you can get some of the runs, but it's more of a REST API kind of approach to that. So you would need to have some other setup in order to analyze that, I think.
Cool. Is there any option to select the memory type that's used?
No, it's not. And so the reason for that is that people aren't that good at, like our target group, they don't know anything about memory. They can't handle the memory thing. I mean, it's a pretty complex thing if you're gonna do it correctly.
Yep.
And so no, at this point, no. But I mean, if people want to contribute that's of course fine. You can choose vector stores, you can choose databases and stuff like that, but not the memory.
And there's a similar question, which is about basically like specifying the text splitting parameters.
That you can do. You can choose the splitter you want. You can even choose when you ingest a PDF, perhaps you don't want to ingest the whole PDF. You want to ingest parts of it. So you can actually choose what pages and what splitter and what length and all of that. You can choose that.
Nice. All right, we're basically out of time. Any last things, words of wisdom, things that people should check out that you want to leave us all with?
Words of wisdom. I mean, keep building, keep pushing. I built Superagent over a couple of months, but the final release was a week, and I think everything is moving super fast. I think that orchestration tools are amazing, and I believe that most of the stuff we do today will be pushed to the model in the future, or some of the stuff we do today will be pushed to the model in the future. But I still believe that orchestration will be key, because we will use a bunch of different models, and you need to orchestrate those models anyways. So I believe that orchestration is super important, and I believe that we need more, people working on that as well as fine-tuning. I think that's a big thing that people need to work more on and understand what's possible and not. So what I do every night at like 2 a.m., I log on to my Hugging Face account and I just go rogue. I just go rogue on all the weird models people have trained, and try to figure out like what this is and what people are doing and what can be achieved, and I try to implement whatever I find is useful and production ready.
Awesome. Well, great words of wisdom, and I think we're all eagerly awaiting the new version of Superagent tomorrow. So thanks for joining us. Really enjoyed it. I think everyone enjoyed it as well. Learned a lot. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, and have a good day, everyone. Thanks for the questions. Bye.
Bye.